Hey everybody, it's Andy, and welcome again to my office in Modesto, California. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York, and this is part 3 of my series about how to do a California divorce from the very beginning to the very end. So in part 1 and part 2, I went over some preamble stuff about, okay, well, a divorce is just a checklist. In part 2 of this video series, I went over, okay, how do you prepare the petition, what forms you have to fill out, how do you serve the petition, and so on. So I'll try to link both of those videos up here in a playlist, hopefully, if I can figure that out. But yeah, so basically, if you want to see part 1 or part 2, look on my channel. Hopefully these videos should all come out in rough kind of proximity to each other. So in this video, part 3, I'm going to go over the stage where I think a lot of people who do their divorce themselves, they basically stumble or struggle tremendously. So tremendously, in fact, that I think a lot of people actually just basically give up and just don't finish their divorce because they don't know how to get over this financial disclosure stage. So that's what we're talking about, the financial disclosure stage. The term that you'll probably hear most often in court is preliminary declarations of disclosure, which I'll try to fit over here actually. Preliminary declarations of disclosures, or PDD. PDD is the term that I hear the most, actually. So PDDs, just kind of know what that refers to, I guess. So what the PDDs are, basically, is a big kind of disclosure, like a big list of all the financial related stuff that this party has, for instance. Let me try to put some more specifics to that. So if you are in a divorce, if you watched my videos, for example, you'll know that California is a community property state. What that basically means is that all the stuff that the couple acquires when they're married, debt, assets, whatever, all of that is going to be divided 50-50 generally when you have a divorce that happens. So in order to kind of divide this kind of amorphous kind of stuff that I've kind of partitioned out here, you need to figure out what's in that stuff first. So you need to figure out what spouse number 1 believes is community property, what spouse number 2 believes is community property, and so on. Without kind of establishing what this stuff is, you can't really divide it realistically, right? So the financial disclosures, the PDDs, that's what this is. Like, you're trying to define what's in this stuff right here. So there's 2 forms that you generally need to fill out. The first one is going to be the FL-150, which I'll try to write over here, actually. But that's the Judicial Council Form FL-150, the Income and Expense Declaration. Getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but the income and expense declaration, that's the FL-150. If you read it, that basically goes over what income you have and what expenses you have. So if you have a job, what your paycheck is, what your pay is, your overtime, your commission, whatever. If you have a rental property also, how much rent you get from that. If you have dividends or a trust or a side business or whatever, all of that stuff will count as income. You got to list it on the FL-150. In addition to that, you have all these expenses. You have rent, food, gas, whatever. All that stuff has to get listed out also. So ideally, the person who reads your FL-150 will know how much money you make, how much money you spend. Hopefully, you spend less than you make, but that's not always the case. But yeah, so that's what the goal of the FL-150 is. The only thing that you really need to attach to the FL-150 is proof of your income. So if you have like a paycheck, for example, attach that. If you have a side business and you have like a balance sheet or a cash flow statement or something, attach that. Something to kind of show that the income that you're claiming is actually genuine. As you can probably imagine, a lot of times people in divorces have the incentive to lie about stuff. They'll say, oh, well, I don't make that much. I only make $1,000 a month or something. When in reality they make like $10,000 a month. Like, people will try various things in divorce court. So just, it keeps everybody honest if there's proof attached. So paychecks basically are the most common proof that's attached to an FL-150, but it's not the only proof that can be attached. So the FL-150, that's kind of the first form. The second form basically is the FL-142, the Schedule of Assets and Debts. If the FL-150 goes over how much money comes in, how much money goes out, the FL-142 goes over what assets do you have, what debts do you have, how much are each of those worth, and so on. So if you have your income, for example, but you're very cash poor because you're struggling and you're trying to make ends meet month to month and so on, you can actually do that and also be very asset rich. Like, you can have, for example, a lot of a lot of real estate, a lot of stock, for example, even though day to day in your pocket, you actually don't have that much cash to actually spend. Some people are actually the reverse. They have a lot of cash on them, but they actually spend all of it, so they have very little savings and so on. So you really need both the FL142 and the FL150 in order to get a complete financial picture. So I'll mention a couple other kind of more kind of rare forms here also. The FL150 is not the only form. You can fill out the form FL155, I believe. I'm not real clear on that form because I've never used it. I think that's a simplified income and expense declaration. You probably have to satisfy a whole bunch of criteria first before you can actually use that form. If you satisfy those criteria, great. The FL150, however, is by far the form that most people fill out. I'm sure some people fill out the 155, but not that many. The second kind of form basically is the FL160. So I'm not quite sure why actually, but in thinking about it now, the FL160, I personally don't use it that often. The FL142 is the more kind of common form. Like I use that one by far, like way more often. So yeah. So the FL142, I guess a couple other comments on it. The first thing is that most people seem to struggle with the FL142 quite a bit. I don't know why. The FL150 people struggle with also, but it doesn't seem like they struggle nearly as much. The FL142 is, for whatever reason, a lot more confusing typically. Yeah, I have no idea why. Actually, I take that back. One possibility, I'm just kind of hypothesizing off the top of my head here. The FL142, the basic rule though, is that all the assets that you list, all the debts that you list, you generally have to provide proof for each of those. Again, a lot of people have the incentive to lie and they try to hide stuff, conceal stuff, and so on. Yeah, so the thing is, for everything that you list on the FL142, you generally should be attaching proof of that also. For that reason, the FL142, usually when it's done, is actually quite long. 50 pages, 80 pages, something like that, depending on what your assets and debts are. If you have a kind of normal, I guess, financial situation where you just have a job, or maybe you have a side business or a rental income or something, the FL150 typically is not that long. It might be like 10 pages at most, but the FL142 can be much, much longer. Maybe that's why people struggle with it, I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, but the basic idea, for the FL142, when you complete it, you got to attach proof of every asset, the value that you claim, every debt, the balance that you claim, and so on. So yeah, so basically the FL142, the FL150, those are the two main forms. You got to provide proof as well, so there's going to be attachments to each of those forms. The other form that generally, or the other documents rather, that generally are included in the financial disclosures are tax returns. So generally speaking, you have to provide the last 2 years of your tax returns, both federal and state. And if you're kind of just recently separated from your from your spouse, generally speaking, that's usually not that kind of earth-shattering. Like basically, whatever taxes you provide them, they'll go, okay, well, yeah, I've seen these before. I helped you prepare them. My name is on them. This is a joint return. So, in a lot of cases, like exchanging tax returns actually doesn't reveal anything new. In some cases, however, it does. I mean, it all depends. So, hopefully that kind of makes sense, I guess. So the financial disclosures, to recap: FL142 typically, FL150 typically, with with attachments for both, and you have the last 2 years of tax returns that you need to exchange also, both federal and state. And aside from that, there's basically two other kind of more minor forms, like the FL140, the FL141. Those are really easy. I'm not going to kind of waste time or spend time on them. The 142 and the 150, people struggle with those tremendously. Yeah, I don't know why exactly, but hopefully after seeing this video at least, you guys will know what PDDs are and what you're supposed to do when your judge tells you, sir or ma'am, you have to do your PDDs, you have to do them within 30 days. The last point I'll mention about PDDs basically is that there is a time limit in which you have to do them. So this is in the rules of court, I believe. I'll try to link those here if I can find them. If I can't, you might have to just take my word for it. But PDDs, generally speaking, have to be done within, actually, I take it back. It's Family Code Section 2107, I think, if I'm remembering that right. It just popped to mind, so hopefully I'm correct, but I'll put that here basically for you. But Family Code 2107, I think, basically says that the PDDs have to be exchanged within 60 days of filing the case. So if you're the petitioner, and you have to do all your PDDs, the Form 142, the 150, etc., within 60 days of filing the case. If you are the respondent, you have to file exchange your PDDs rather within 60 days of filing your response, whatever that is. So the PDD deadline, the 60-day deadline, some judges that I've been in front of do enforce that fairly strictly. Other judges don't. But even if they don't enforce that 60-day deadline, they'll notice, oh, it's been 4 months or 6 months or something. You still haven't done your PDDs. I'm going to order that you do your PDDs within 30 days. If you don't, you might get sanctioned with a financial fine or something. So that actually can happen. So just kind of know that the clock that you're working with to do your PDDs is not infinite. You are supposed to rather do all of that within 60 days. 60 days you might have some leeway depending on the judge, but just as a general rule, leeway like that, don't expect it. If you get it, great, be grateful, but don't kind of rely on the fact that you're entitled to leeway, for example, like that. So hopefully that helps. Again, to recap, basically financial disclosures, FL 142 typically, FL 150 typically, along with all the attachments that each of those will require. Plus, you have to do you have to exchange your taxes, your last 2 years of taxes. So you got to do all of that within 60 days. In my experience, the vast majority of people do not make those 60 days. They miss them. They miss them by sometimes a little bit, sometimes quite a bit. But basically, just know if this is really difficult and you have a limited amount of time, get started on them early. So anyway, hopefully that helps. That's part 3, and I will move on to part 4. I believe from now on, part 4, 5, and 6, etc., will basically vary depending on your case. Up to now, all of this stuff has been, I hate to say universal, I'm not sure if that's the right word. Basically, everybody who files for a divorce has to do these stages. They have to serve the petition. They have to do their PDDs, for example. From now, from this point onward, there's going to be some similarities still, but there's going to be variability depending on what the other spouse in the case, the respondent, does. So just kind of keeping that in mind, I guess let's move on to part 4.